everybody. Welcome back to the Luxury Week. And for our next talk, I'm delighted to introduce you to Angela Tunner, who is the founder, editor-in-chief of Eat, Love, Savor, which is a very high-end bookazine. Angela has a background in fine dining and hospitality and is now an acclaimed publisher. And I would also like to introduce you to Dr. Martina Olbertova, who is the founder and CEO of Meaning.Global. She is a social scientist, brand advisor, cultural strategist, and semiotician. Hello, welcome.
Hello, Hannah. Pleasure to be here.
And Angela is joining us from Canada, just outside Vancouver, and Martina is in Prague. So again, our international credentials are doing really well for them using this technology. Thank you for joining us. Sorry, it was a little bit tricky trying to get you both in, but we're here.
Yeah, but we're here. That's all that matters.
Yes. Yeah. So what we're going to be talking about today is the Luxury Renaissance, which is the title of your new show. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering if we could start just by talking about the Luxury Renaissance. So what's the premise for this?
Wow. Okay. What's the premise? So it's quite actually a complex question. There's a lot in it, obviously. What we sort of didn't see happening was this whole COVID pandemic and how it would absolutely make what we were sort of working on for a year with Angela now much more relevant and much more, current and much more important to actually talk about. So this whole luxury renaissance, the idea actually started last year when I published my report on luxury, the luxury report. And that was specifically focusing on redefining the future meaning of luxury for the luxury industry, obviously, and for the luxury brands to regain their lost meaning, to become culturally relevant again and regain their sort of social and cultural currency in the market and with people, and obviously become more of catalyst of cultural change or becoming really interesting for people in the 21st century in a way that they want to creatively express themselves and in a way that gives them voice. The reason why I published the report was that two things. I sort of saw the overall kind of meaninglessness in the marketplace where, there's obviously lack of differentiation, there's lack of relevance, lack of, being able to sort of create long-term consumer bonds between brands and people. And I was sort of thinking how to put this message forward in a way that really resonates with the industry. And I thought, wait a minute, luxury brands. Luxury brands are where this need for meaning and the intangibles is far more visible and far more important because their entire brand value is based on the excess of symbolic value over the functional aspect of the brands and products. So that's why I published the report, and it was really looking at these whole like cultural shifts in the marketplace from, let's say, personal luxury goods more towards embracing luxurious lifestyle and new identities and experiences and meaningful experiences. Going away from like excess on opulence towards, embracing luxury essentialism, essentially, finding sort of meaningful place in our lives where brands really resonate and give us some kind of meaningful value and elevate our lives. And also, sort of going away a little bit with this like fascination and predominant focus on heritage and legacy, more towards finding the new points of relevance for brands, how they can add value to people's lives. And lastly, figuring out how to tap into the cultural zeitgeist to use luxury brands as a sort of catalyst of cultural change, to put the values in front of the brand and the product. So with this whole thing, I sort of thought what is really missing is the fundamental context in which luxury brands can regain their meaning. So Angela and I started talking, and we've really been very close for the course of the last year. And this whole luxury renaissance show is really our own baby together. It's really the sort of the crescendo of our combined efforts to put the missing knowledge and the missing context for the luxury industry much more to the forefront of the discussion.
Exactly. And it's when I read her report that I noticed how much her knowledge and her perspective really dovetailed with the mission and vision of the publication, which was edutainment, to really go back to the pillars, the DNA of the luxury brands, to be focused less on consumerism and more focused on those really key essentials of luxury that are much more deeply emotional and connective, and knowing that it's going through an evolution over time. And I also sensed that there was going to be some sort of cultural shift, but I didn't know what, because the magazine's been around for a decade. And this is its sort of pinnacle moment, because now we're really able to capture the attention. The industry is shift, the mindset of the consumer is starting to shift, and really it is lifestyle. So when I saw and read that report, I contacted her immediately with it, I think the same day that I read the report, and that the rest, as they say, is history. And the gentleman who introduced us, Antonio Pereso, who ended up being our first guest on the show, it was just a really beautiful full circle moment. And then being in this time frame now, to move forward with it, we're really excited about what the industry can walk into, certainly by embracing its roots, its DNA, and shifting that conversation, which I think is really critical at this time. So we're really excited about the show and its potential, and it's been so very well received. And we're really delighted to be here to be able to share more about what it is that we're working on.
I mean, we're really excited to have you, and I think this sort of connection between the social science of things, the philosophy of luxury, as it were, moving, towards you, Angela, the actual sort of practicality, how it tastes, how it feels, which you experience every day with your publication. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is, how is the meaning of luxury changing in a post-pandemic society?
So, it actually started changing. It's actually started changing quite significantly, and that's exactly why I wrote that report last year when I was observing all these shifts. What I sort of didn't foresee at the time was how much this COVID pandemic would really speed up the transition towards the space that I was envisioning last year in the report. So even now, prepping for this interview, I was looking back through the report and I was thinking, wow, I mean, all of those shifts I kind of felt, in the sort of market trends on a conceptual level, but I did not foresee that it would be fully here. It would be fully our own presence in 2020, literally like a year after I published this. So
phrase, the new normal,
absolutely the new normal. So what the new normal really is, and what we are really seeing in this COVID pandemic time, is really the fundamental shift from the external world back to our internal world. So it's about, being much more conscious and mindful of, now that we have the time to pause and we don't have to literally commute to work and go back to work, and we are not on this kind of autopilot, becoming, desensitized, unconscious robots, just, sort of carrying out tasks just because that's the way that we've always done it. Now that we've had this time to pause for the last 3 or 4 months, we really become much more aware and conscious of what it is that we like, don't like, what our values are like, who we are, what we want on the fundamental kind of soul level, on the essence level, what makes us become, alive, what is meaningful to us, what do we really care about. And these long-term values that cater to what do we fundamentally care about will become inevitably the new luxury. So what actually we were seeing before, but now it's only becoming much more apparent and much more important for the industry, for the luxury industry to sort of embrace on the business level, is that there is this fundamental shift that pertains to scarcity that's going on. So if you look back in the past, what luxury used to stand for, it was all about excess of material wealth, kind of, status, opulence, showing things off to other people, because in that particular context of that, point in time, the majority of people had very little, and therefore, only the sort of sacred few or chosen few had the means to sort of embrace that material excess of wealth and opulence. So it kind of makes sense as a juxtaposition between an excess or like maximalism and minimalism. Well, now sort of fast forward all of these, centuries and decades forward, and we are literally finding ourselves in a completely opposite landscape. We are constantly bombarded by, information, media, communication, advertising. We have an absolute overproduction and oversaturation of anything that we could possibly want and need. What we do not have, and what those people in the past did have in abundance, is that connection to ourselves and our core essence. So this is why the new luxury will be much more about catering to those fundamental essential needs that we sort of forgot that we had, but are really important in order for us to actually be able to even value anything. And that is precisely these essential human needs are creating that context for the emergence of the new luxury paradigm.
Yeah, I mean, I find it really fascinating that, and you talk a bit about this in your report, that luxury used to mean excess, and it was, but luxury is the opposite of what is ordinary. So if it becomes ordinary,
absolutely,
then luxury must go the other way, and it must be more minimal. Which I think is a good sign for sustainability.
And essential, more than minimal, essential. I think that minimalism is embracing that kind of essence or need for essence on a formal level. It's all about what that looks like. But the next step, obviously, beyond minimalism, is taking the essence and putting it back to our, core. So it's all about the intangibles, the needs, and the things that that bring us to life and that really need. So what we need is meaningful experiences to sort of facilitate that, fundamental sort of coming back to our inner selves. So, we need meaningful travel to obviously take us out of that, context of our ordinary life, to be able to juxtapose who we are in a different environment and then sort of make that mental shift. We need, essential luxury that sort of enhances and elevates an ordinary everyday, moment in our lives around what we find valuable. So it's all really coming towards essence. Yeah. The essential luxury literally is the new luxury.
I find that so interesting, and I want to come to kind of essentialism in luxury in a minute, because that's definitely one of the key points I'd love to cover. I also wanted to ask, with travel becoming more limited in our post-COVID immediate future, will high net worth individuals shift their spending back to material objects and away from experiences? Because we've heard a lot in luxury over the last few years, the shift from sort of products to experiences. Will the pandemic shift it back the other way or not? Angela, perhaps we can speak to you about this.
Absolutely. The interesting thing is I was doing some research and found over a 30-day period back in mid-June, actually the searches for cottages were up 190%, glamping was up 180%, and wellness and resorts were up 65 and 50% respectively. And what I believe this is saying is, while international travel may be limited, local travel is not. And private jet use is way up. So people are still able to get away, but within reason. And I think what makes it much more meaningful is that they're getting away to locations that are allowing them to be able to distance safely and also really have a truly luxurious experience, because they're getting that aspect of remote, they're getting the privacy and the seclusion. So I think it just shifts it in the way that it is experienced. I don't think it's a return to materialism, though the wealthy will always buy. There's never going to be a lack of that, but it will be maybe with more purpose, and certainly looking at it in a way with there's less sort of consumption as it is meaning and purpose. And everybody wants to get away, even if it is on local and becoming a tourist in your own town. You know, most of the wealthy seem to be moving out of cities and moving back into the countrysides to maybe their second or third homes, and really starting to live a little more quietly, a little bit more with peacefulness, as opposed to the hustle and bustle of the city. So that's really pivoting where they spend and what they spend on as well. But I think that this is an important transition because, again, it is really demonstrating that people are looking to still have experiences, but they're definitely more inner experiences. That solitude really does a lot to help give us a new perspective. And this is definitely a time of inner reflection and new perspective.
And sort of continuing on from that, like, how can the new luxury tap into this idea of self-actualization, becoming who you are? You know, how can luxury help you become the person that you're intended to be, as it were?
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting question. I think that one of the things that, and touching back to materialism and this whole idea of, you know, how did we get to this stage? The fact that the history of luxury is rooted in aristocracy and royalty, and those groups of individuals had a very different lifestyle and manner of thinking. It's that luxury lifestyle mindset, and it affected everything from what they ate, what they purchased, which was much more personalized. There was a lot of knowledge on the material, the craftsmanship, how to care for things. That in itself has a deeply rooted connection to self, because it was a self-expression. And with us moving away from the 80s, when all those luxury brands started to become larger houses and they went public, and then it turned it from, you know, the small maison that were serving the clients directly to a shift in how we approached what we purchased. So entry-level products being used to get new people into the luxury industry as consumers. That shifted the mindset. And that was a slippery shift. It was wonderful for accumulation of revenues and to grow the industry. But at the same time, it really decontextualized luxury, and it disconnected it from what it really was meant to be. And now we're coming back to that. And I think that us reconnecting with our emotions, our spirituality, ourselves in the world affects how we buy. And this is a really important pivot point that if it weren't for the COVID change, we may not have arrived quite to this moment. So it is a really defining history in the making moment for the industry and for individuals at large.
Absolutely. So that idea, we've kind of been through this democratization of luxury, and now we're entering the next stage where, you know, more sustainable consumption equals more considered purposes, and with every purchase you buy, it means something else about you, for example.
I suppose actually it is still democratization. It's just in an opposite way. So it's not an excess of material goods catering to basically opening the floodgates towards a large mass market, but it's the other way around. So it's brands actually looking at people and what people find meaningful and relevant and giving it to them. So it's still about democratization, but it's rather democratization of values that is driven by humans and humanity, and sort of makes that pressure on brands to be relevant and meaningful and valuable to them, rather than just buying, as Angela said, you know, keychains that are sort of, you know, masking themselves as luxury, but really they're just the low-hanging fruit. So
no, it's incredibly interesting. You know, this whole idea of brands and branding goes back, you know, is very deeply connected to the human psyche. Why is it we're so motivated by this idea of brands?
Oh, that is again a question that I could possibly talk about for 2 or 3 hours. I think in a nutshell, 2 words: human transcendence. So brands obviously give us, they're the vehicle of 2 things. On one hand, they allow us to creatively express our own identity, our own values, and become sort of more of who we are, because we constantly have something to aspire to. And that way we are constantly sort of elevating ourselves and transcending the present moment in order to become more of who we are, essentially. The other perspective is that we are able to do all this in the eyes of others. So it's also, brand is a really powerful and important social marker of status that sort of helps us with social mobility. Where, in luxury, that's actually very, very important, to consume brands as sort of vehicles of social mobility. To signify what sort of we want to put forward for other people to see about us, to essentially gain a competitive advantage in the world. So there is the symbolic and intangible aspect, as well as a very practical, functional aspect to luxury, and that's why it's so packed with meaning. But also from not just catering to luxury brands specifically, but why are brands so important to people, and why do they connect with them so deeply on like a essential level, or even like a spiritual level, is that in the consumer society, we are essentially embracing a completely different ideology that we used to have throughout, the history again. We are saturating these, almost religious beliefs that, we don't really have a proper way to channel in a different way. So that's why you could see that, many sociologists are talking about shopping malls as the sort of modern day shrines of consumerism, because it's literally about worshiping, material objects and luxury, because they have this sort of heightened sense of symbolic value. They're perfect examples of doing just that. So we connect with brands so deeply precisely because they allow us to connect so deeply with ourselves. They're essentially the catalysts for becoming more of who we are.
Yeah. So kind of bringing in a topic that we mentioned earlier, can luxury ever be essential? What's the connection between these 2 things?
Well, it is. It always has been essential.
It is. That's exactly the point. And that's why we're doing this whole show about the rebirth of luxury for the new world, because we want to show that it is essential. It's not about materialism. It's become about materialism because luxury and the value of luxury and the knowledge about luxury has become completely decontextualized in the world. And that's why the only thing that was left were these social markers of success and status. That's why that happened. That's why it's so connected to materialism. But it wasn't supposed to be. It was always supposed to be essential to your life, because it's allowing you to elevate your lifestyle and sort of heighten your senses and sensitivity. And the more perceptive and open and sensitive you are to your environment, the more creative you are, and the higher sort of level of quality of your life you have. So there's actually this really interesting quote by Shakespeare, who said that removing what is superfluous to a man will annihilate his humanity. So from this point, you can see that the dreams and the being able to wish for something and sort of transcend your present moment isn't inessential. It is literally what makes us human. Exactly. So if you look at luxury from this point of view, it is absolutely essential. It's just that luxury brands need to figure out how to put this meaning and essence back into their brands in order to become much more meaningful and actually serve, to people to sort of create better and more meaningful lifestyles.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so interesting. So, one of the real takeaways for any brands tuning is to create meaning and value within the brand. So talking a bit, I want to touch on cultural localization. So we mentioned a bit about this before.
Mm-hmm.
So how important is cultural localization and personalization of luxury to drive relevance? And which brands do you think are doing this really well, in your opinion?
Yeah. So obviously we are catering to a global market right now. And the problem with globalization is that it has this long tail, which sort of makes the communication and the products and the strategies and campaigns much more homogenized, because you have to sort of flatten out the cultural differences in order to cater to everyone with some sort of common denominator that everybody will understand, while still retaining the brand essence or the brand DNA so that's relevant to the brand. The problem with this, globalized universal strategy that really started, like flourishing at the beginning of 90s is essentially that with the, sort of entry of all these conglomerates monopolizing luxury into big houses. What is the sort of aftermath of that, or the consequence, is that we have precisely flattened out those cultural differences, but those cultural differences are exactly what make brands meaningful in those regional markets around the world, because they are precisely those things that create the makeup of the regional market, of the cultural beliefs and values and things that people around the world find meaningful for themselves. And you can really see it in China, for instance, where they, you can see that it's sort of the globalized strategies are hitting the limit, and where it comes to being really relevant for the Chinese consumer in order to them finding the products interesting or attractive. So the luxury groups are now actually creating their own brand, in China, as a true luxury brands that will be specifically catering just to that market. But to the second point of that question, so obviously very, very important, because it's literally what makes up half of the brand equity, because equity flows both ways. It flows from the top down and from bottom up. So you need to retain the brand essence in order to create something that will be still relevant for the brand around the world, but equally you need to take into account those cultural differences so that you can create those points of resonance, which then obviously will make the products and brands more attractive and will stimulate the purchasing. On the second part of the question, who is doing it well? I think the group who would be probably the leader in cultural diversification is LVMH. So LVMH seems to be strategizing really well on multiple different levels when it comes to cultural diversity. So first off, they created they gave Rihanna her sort of like an opportunity to create her own brand within the LVMH house. So that tells you, that is exactly the fifth cultural shift that I was talking about in my report last year. That shows you that, the really successful players in luxury will be those who will not only tap into the cultural zeitgeist, but will precisely become the catalyst of cultural change. So obviously giving someone with such a huge cultural currency and such a big persona for the new millennial generation, giving her an opportunity to create her own brand based on her own values in a way that is authentic, to an entire new audience of young women who have the sort of aspire to be like her or aspire to the same kind of values. The way that they've done it in a completely authentic way is definitely one example. So that is creating your own brand. Then obviously investing into other brands who have their own sort of audiences and are creating very sort of culturally relevant or authentic meaning in their own right. And that would be the move of LVMH to invest in this small sort of street brand based in California called Mad Happy, who really embraced this sort of empowerment of mental health education, and really not just in a way that they talk about it, as many brands do, but in a way that they were able to embed it in the core of their brand and actually in the products. So the product themselves are creating this awareness around why mental health is so important and how humans are equally mad and happy. And we need to really embrace both sides of our psyche to really become integrated and become whole. So these moves, and then obviously the Tiffany deal that, well, it now fell through because of COVID. But that is another example how, big luxury houses can sort of tap into this authentic meaning by sort of leveraging the authentic cultural heritage of a really famous brand that's been around for a century.
So which Tiffany deal are you referring to? Which deal fell through, sorry?
Of LVMH purchasing Tiffany.
Yes. Interesting. I think it's interesting in general that luxury brands are doing these collaborations with more kind of subcultural brands as well. So talking about street brands, skate brands, trying to pull in new demographics, new consumers, and pulling in their meaning into a more high-end sphere as well. So I just wanted to ask you kind of a few personal questions, if you don't mind, about what's on, as experts in luxury, what's on your personal luxury wish list?
I know we were talking a bit about this last night.
Do you want to start, Angela? Or should I go?
Oh, I like yours. Go ahead. I'd like to hear.
Okay, so I've been basically just talking for 40 minutes about embracing essential luxury, so it would be very hypocritical of me to say anything else. But I actually happen to really believe it, so that's what
that's what matters.
That's what my own behavior is like. So I had this obviously stage, early in my career when I started obviously making, more money. I sort of still was, in this trapped in this sort of status seeking, mindset. So I had my, fair share of like buying bags just because they were luxurious. Not anymore though. So what I have on my wish list right now are actually only 2 items. And one is, they both from Yves Saint Laurent. They're actually both from the male collection of Yves Saint Laurent because I happen to be kind of a tomboy. So I like their style much better than the female style. So I really like the croc pattern leather wallet in their portfolio, and I also like the same kind of style backpack. The reason for them are because I sort of like the idea of elevating the little moments in my life that I happen to value, and they're really important to me. So I wouldn't just buy a lot of, luxury products just because they're luxurious or they're pretty, but I really want to put an emphasis on those moments that I find meaningful and valuable for myself. So obviously I want a nice, house for my money, which is, enhancing that with like a nice wallet. And then I kind of travel a lot, and I've realized, after having a myriad of bags, that the backpack is probably the most practical thing that I can have. It fits a lot of stuff, and it's nice. So these are the two things that are on my wish list for now. Angela?
I'm sure that will shift and change. But the connection to meaning is something for me that is a driving force in the things that I purchase. For example, I had an inheritance from a grandparent, and she had escaped during the war from Prussia. And for her, she had a few items that really meant something to her. So I purchased some pieces of Louis Vuitton that reminded me of her with some of the inheritance money. So every time I use them and see them now, it reminds me of her. I have a Chanel this and Valentino that and Ferragamo shoes and variety of things. But again, they all came from meaningful purchases. But the thing that really drives me more is the lifestyle. So being as busy as I am, having created my own luxury world with the magazine, I'm steeped in it day and night. I dream of it. I wake up to it. So being that busy for me, if I had a larger home, say, with a larger kitchen so I could accommodate a personal chef to come in and cook. And one dream for me is having been in the service industry, hospitality, fine dining, 2 fridges. That to me would be phenomenal, because I like one with the ingredients and the raw foods, and then another one for all the prepared foods, because how glorious would that be to open up a refrigerator and have all sorts of cooked dishes there ready for you to snack on and,
You
and to serve.
You forgot to say that you're a gourmet chef, by the way.
Well, there's that too. But it's still nice to have someone cook for you, even though you know how to do it. And flower delivery on a regular basis, and my own personal spa in the house would be phenomenal too, to bring in a masseuse and an esthetician at my beck and call. So, and to me, even just having what I need at my fingertips is a bit of a luxury as well. So it is really about the mindset. And caring for the things that you bring in. You know, I have pieces that will be legacy for my son that I would pass down to him, including the pieces that I purchased with my grandmother in mind. So it really is, it comes down to how you look at it, and also what means something to you. So it forges a connection to you on a much deeper level, and isn't disposable. Something that really is part of who you are and part of your own personal history.
So, you know, using the money you inherited, you are then investing in heirlooms that you can pass on, you know,
precisely,
as well, with that double sense of meaning, as it were.
Indeed.
And I also think, coming back to your original question, Hannah, about the luxury renaissance, this is sort of like a nice dot behind the whole segment, because it really is about coming back. I mean, obviously not to aristocracy and meritocracy, that is sort of the divide that already happened in the 80s, but really coming back to that value culture, you know, what those aristocrats really knew and what contextualized luxury with meaning. Because what we've sort of done, you know, with the, you know, embracing the sort of consumer culture as our own habitat over the last, you know, 50, 60, 70 years, is that we've completely decontextualized purchase, and we've also made everything disposable. So really coming back to that value culture and understanding what is meaningful to you and how to take proper value of things, and really just buying things that you know that you want to commit to long term, because they sort of are, you know, connected to your own values, because you have that in-depth understanding of who you are. That is going to be the new foundation for the new luxury, and that is essentially what the new normal will become.
So having less things in your life, less possessions, but the things that you do have incredibly special meaning.
Mean something to you.
Much more meaning.
Because if you can buy anything, nothing will mean anything to you. So it's essentially in that lack of, or the other way around, the complete abundance of things that you really don't want, that you find things that are meaningful to you. But really, it's about, you know, connecting back to your own essence and finding out who you are and what speaks to you. And then you can really surround yourself with, you know, material objects or experiences or lifestyle or things that are equally tangible and intangible. But the common thread here is that it needs to mean something to you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. So fascinating to speak to both of you.